We're streaming to all the right places, Lloyd. We're live with Why Wells Fail. How are you?
Steve, I'm all the good. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I love these conversations. I learn so much. You're one of the several VIPs I work with. These are inspiring, and I learn. And the cool thing is to get to see the leader glow. They're flowing in their element. They get to talk about what they do. Oftentimes, you don't get to express these things, right? You do your work. Your spouse is engaged, but she's never going to interrogate you like I do, and most people don't have time. But it's something that's important, and it's based in your why, and you show up in the world to improve all these things. You need to talk about it. It feels good.
That is a fact.
So real quick, so you had a little procedure.
I had my right knee replaced, so I'm halfway to being the $6 million man.
So you just $3 million at the moment, huh?
Just 3 million.
All right. So guess what we're talking about? We're talking about when a well is birthed, there's a couple of things that lead to big penalties over the long haul, and that's acid gas. That's H₂S, and then carbon CO₂. Is that carbon dioxide?
That's carbon dioxide.
All right. My mind's going, am I saying this right? Because I was getting it. We're not talking about Coke. We're talking about something else. But when a well's birthed, you got acid gas. It eats up the equipment and causes the well to be shut down and fix things that it deteriorated. And then obviously CO₂ being released is a negative. But this is just assumed. It is what it is. It just comes with the territory. But your premise is, no, that's not the case. What if we looked at this as if we had a plan, we knew what we were working with, then we could control this, actually take advantage of it.
Yeah, what you're saying is there's a belief that it's just naturally occurring, that it's already been created within the formation. And there are times that is the correct answer. It's just there. Especially when we're looking at H₂S, and like in the Delaware Basin, there are places that there's just natural fissures or natural areas within the geology that have very, very high H₂S. And also the same thing can be said of CO₂. There's a neat place up in northern New Mexico called the Bravo Dome. And the Bravo Dome is 100% CO₂. It's an area that was massively produced, and that gas was shipped down to the Permian Basin and other locations and was used for tertiary injection. They were injecting it into areas and that were potentially a water flood, and then they come in with the CO₂, and they're using that to repressurize and drive the gas through the formation, grab the oil, and move it into well bores. That's not what we're talking about here. It can be the case in a well that there is naturally occurring high CO₂ and H₂S. But what we discovered is that the fracking process, the natural disruption that happens during that, is what actually generates higher, more concentrations of H₂S and CO₂ through that disruptive practice we call hydraulic fracking.
So in that process, either it's released or it's captured or suppressed.
Well, in the process, it can be generated, and then it can reconstitute itself as something else. Or it ends up coming in our produced fluids and the oil and gas and the water that are produced from wells. And what we found is if we engineer our completion fluids in a manner and other additives that go into the geology, that we can suppress that reaction, the generation of CO₂ and H₂S, and therefore improve the stability of the well, the operating parameters of the well. And a secondary benefit is these wells have produced more oil over a longer period of time because the geology is not degrading in a place and trapping the resource and keeping it from being produced, through the well bore and creating a major decline curve. And so again, it's understanding the rock, know the rock. That is the very first step of seeking to understand and then to be understood, as Mr. Stephen R. Covey used to say.
So to know the rock, you have a process. What's the name? How do you know the rock?
Well, the first thing is we utilize tools like XRF and XRD that can come through the drilling of the well. And that's the first component of knowing the rock. The second component of knowing the rock is when you do put a stimulation fluid on there, a frac fluid, what are the reactions that are going to happen based on that mineralogy of that geology, and predicting that reaction, that response, and then writing a prescription to keep that reaction, the negative reactions, from happening. We want the positive reaction of creating space that allows the oil and gas to flow into the wellbore, but we want to remove the negative components of that fracking practice, which generates CO₂, H₂S, and the swelling and embedding of water in the geology that doesn't let it produce the hydrocarbon. So it's a function, but the first thing is know the rock.
So know the rock. When you test that, you're also testing it. You're simulating the pressure and the heat as well. That's going on.
Yeah, that's the part of the process, is not taking what we know happens at the surface, which is what our industry has done for the last 30 years, 20 years, to say 20, 25 years, and really now understand what is happening at reservoir temperature, reservoir pressure, and then the compounding pressure of the energy that we put during the fracking process. What does all that energy, how does that change the way that these fluids respond to the geology that it's coming in contact with?
So the operational reality of applying this process is, if you generally, there's what I call it scope creep, but there's a creep, at least operating expense creep, that's happening when you have corrosion and scale and safety concerns, and you're preventing or extending that. No?
Well, we're preventing, yeah, and it's called the law of compounding. What you're talking about there, Steve, is we had the law of unintended consequences, right? And during the fracking process, we had a lot early back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We had a lot of assumptions we made, but we didn't know what we didn't know. And so now, fast forward to where we are today, we know a lot more than we did, and we're continuing to learn. But we went back to that foundational hypothesis, is that we're taking something that's in equilibrium and we're disrupting it. And now we're predicting the consequences of that disruption, called fracking, on this geology. And then from there, the first reactions that we see, why do they do what they do? And it's called chemistry and physics. And then we move through that. And ultimately, the compounding effect is when you have this catalyst reaction, this disruption, it generates CO₂, it generates H₂S, and then you put a well in, it's made out of metal goods, it corrodes the metal goods, it creates opportunities for mechanical failure that has to be repaired and replaced. But then secondarily, when you produce it up, you've got to do something with it. So now you got to manage. How do you get rid of the CO₂? How do you get rid of the H₂S? And now we know that there are significant costs that are tied to that. So it's just, at every phase, part of our job is to understand the cause and effect. And it begins with knowing the rock, knowing what we're doing to it by the fluids that we're putting on it to frack it. Ultimately know what our job is to produce the most amount of resource in the most cost-effective manner over the life of the well. And so that's what we're doing. And again, it goes to one of the key effects is knowing how and why you're generating different types of gases and other mineral reactions.
Just kind of came to me, there we're talking about pressures downhole. Okay. These pressures that we have to deal with, and we have to know how they're going to work, because eventually we're going to improve the process. But these pressures that exist externally, like your lease operating expense creep. I love that term, by the way. That's just clear to me what's going on. It's creeping expenses based on what's coming out of the hole. And if you didn't control that, there's a cost associated with that. But you have other pressures coming on, and they're economic, there are shareholder pressures, there's other pressures like, I guess, reporting or stakeholder scrutiny. These are pressures that you're addressing as well, because they're expecting what? That this well is going to perform optimally.
Well, and there's been promises made, right? We've got, there are so many companies that have made promises that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. Well, guess what? We helped them do that. And it wasn't why we did what we did. We were wanting to understand the mechanical and physical degradations to produce more oil and gas. And we discovered, hey, in the process of doing that, we're actually impacting how much CO₂ and H₂S greenhouse gases are being produced or not produced, in this case, suppressed. And so, but then you start looking at, hey, there's ancillary costs that are the cost of buying scale inhibitor and corrosion inhibitor, and then paying for H₂S scavenger and or treating units. And there's just, you go down the food chain, and there's a lot of food in the chain if you don't do the things right. And if you do the things right, there's not so much food. And the more food that's in the chain, the higher the LOE. And the less food that's in the chain, the lower the LOE. And then the real benefit is the type curve of the well increases its rate of production of oil and gas by 40% and more.
That's the statement.
It's the truth. And the beautiful part of it is it's all public data that we're happy to share to show the truth. It's facts. I'm not just sitting here being a great snake oil salesman and saying, gotcha. I'm gonna cure everything that's wrong with you. But in this case, we're going to cure these things that are wrong with the well because we understand why they happen. And it's as we teach it, everybody goes, God, it's so intuitive. How did we miss it?
40% on a well, that's a significant number when you're talking about production numbers as far as dollars.
It's the difference between an average of 1,000 barrels a day and 1,400 barrels a day average. And you put 100 on top of that at the price of oil, it's a number. You make 400 barrels a day, 30 days a month. That's 12,000 barrels a month more on average over the life of a well, or in this case, our studies are 36 months. It turns into millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, depending on where the well is and the quality of the geology.
Back when I was a bartender back in the day, it's happy hour. You order one, but you got two, or sometimes three. You guys have a legitimate happy hour. You drill a well, you're going to get a half of a well. If not, you drill 2 wells, you get basically 1 well free.
That's right.
Two investments with the output of 3 investments.
That's right. And that's not compounding in. Those are going to have dramatically lower operating expense. That's interest. That's interest on interest. Again, compounding. Warren Buffett would love us if he was still active. And hey, Warren, if you're out there listening to this on any of our 3 channels that we're talking to you, we'd love to show you some cool, really cool additional compounding that's going on.
And we haven't even really, next season, we're going to talk about the bonus on top.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man, I get excited when I talk about this, and I'm not even in the oil and gas industry, Lloyd.
Well, you are, because you work with us.
Well,
Yep.
there you go.
Based on the law of compounding, you are now, Steve.
All right. Well, I'm proud to be part of this. So let's all right, so let's tie this up. We established the attitude, or the accepted reality is it is what it is, and we just have to deal with this. But the truth is, if you go in and follow the Pathfinder process, that actually that's not the reality. The reality is that you can reduce or multiply the impact of this well, the outperformance of this well, by just following the Pathfinder process.
That's correct.
Which changes the reality. And if I'm running a legitimate business, I look for places that would be like a high leverage implementation of a procedure that multiplies outcomes, and that's what you guys are offering to these operating companies.
That's correct.
So, if someone's been listening to this and the light bulb's starting to flicker or go off, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, snap a picture of our QR code up there in the corner of the screen, or you can hit me up at Refine C Lloyd B on multiple platforms, and or my website and email address. There's the website, refinecompletions.com, and we have a lot of call to action buttons, as you can attest to, Steve. Mm-hmm. And then they can shoot a direct email to me at lloyd.brown@refinecompletions.com.
Awesome. So we're about to wrap up. This is our 2nd season, is it not?
It is our 2nd season.
When are we going to wrap this up?
At the end of this month. So okay. Today is the 11th. So two weeks from today will be our last, because then that'll be Labor Day. Mm-hmm. And then we'll roll into into August of this next year and kick back off with a new name, as well as a new focus.
A new paradigm.
That's right.
Look at you, Lloyd Brown, bringing these new paradigms to an industry at the right time. Everything's lining up. If there was a time in history that everybody's talking about oil and gas, it's now.
That is true.
If they were to drop refined solutions right in a Hormuz Strait, everything flows better through there. You just eliminate any H₂S stuff, right?
Well, yeah, and we make what is produced there. The impact that we have, we can make up for the lost production and become a net exporter in our country, and friendly countries that don't have to deal with tyrannical, crazy folks that say death to America. Mm-hmm. Let's do life to America. Let's spread, this beautiful country, the life, liberty, and freedoms that we have.
Yeah,
we're so blessed. We are so unbelievably blessed.
Let's help spread life to the world. All right, Lloyd, so many good things. Good job today. New name, new paradigm coming up here in the next season of Why Wells Fail with Lloyd Brown. Connect with Lloyd talk about what it looks like, literally tripling. Would it be triple? We have to figure out what that is. If you bring refined in, you're going to what? Triple your output?
Well, you're going to get a compounding average of 1 well free for every 2 that you do at a minimum. And it's probably better than that.
What a happy hour. That's a great idea. All right. Why wells fail. We'll see you guys next week, same time. And that's a wrap.